Good morning, friends. It is a blustery and cold morning. Perfect time to be inside making a video. So I wanted to come on here and make this follow-up to this month's Intuition Lab held the first Wednesday of February, because we explored a really kind of juicy and provocative topic. And in the short hour that we have for Intuition Lab, just wasn't quite enough time to dig deep into all of the practices that I wanted to share with y'all about how to navigate this topic. And so I just wanted to create this follow-up video that's specifically going to be focusing on a particular practice to help continue this work. And because this practice is super accessible and applicable to a lot of other things in our life, I decided to just share it here in this public space as well as in the private space of Intuition Lab. For those of you who don't know, Intuition Lab is a monthly offering, free offering that I share for the community of folks who are signed up on my newsletter. And it is a 1-hour gathering where we explore concepts and practices about our intuition, about how to build our intuition. What is the intuition? Why is it important in our life? How can we deepen our relationship with this inherent capacity that we have to have an inner guidance system to help us make decisions and move through our life? And they've been really amazing, fertile spaces. I've been really pleased with what has been coming through. So if that sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, you can sign up for my newsletter list on the website, which I'll link down below, heartscapesinsight.com. Once you're on the newsletter, you get the invitation every month for Intuition Lab, as well as access to our Intuition Lab library, where we keep all of the recordings of the past labs and other resources like this video. So let's get into it. So that topic from this month was holding accountability and compassion, self-compassion, when we are wrong. And what we explored was the reality that when we're in the process of building a new skill, when we're in the process of experimenting around a new skill, in this case, building our intuition, learning to recognize its language, and then to respond and make decisions and take action based on what we learn from our intuition, which is often not necessarily backed up by a lot of facts or data, right? Intuition is that realm of decision making where there is not a wealth of concrete knowledge and information to base our decisions on. So we really have to cultivate a trust in our gut feeling and an ability to follow it. And when we're in a process of building that capacity, inevitably, we are going to make mistakes. Inevitably, we're going to make mistakes in life, regardless of what's going on with our intuition. And sometimes those mistakes cause harm or have other consequences that are challenging for ourselves or other people. And one of the things that I've identified in myself and in other people that I've worked with is that when we hit that experience where we made a decision based on what we thought was good intuition, and then it wasn't, maybe it was, a feeling that was based on a fear or some old jealousy or, some other thing that wasn't our intuition. Or maybe we had an intuitive we had an intuition that invited us to go in a certain direction, but it wasn't a direction we wanted to go, so we chose a different direction, and then there were some harsh consequences to that. When we have that experience, if we are not resilient to the experience of making a mistake and causing harm, and we do not have the capacity to be with that and to make amends for it, to be in integrity with that mistake, to be able to move through it, get to the other side of it, experience the benefits and the beauty that happens when we take responsibility for mistakes that we've made and harm that we've caused, and experience the growth that inevitably comes when we go through a process like that. If we're not able to be with that, then, first of all, we're not going to be able to, be in good integrity and accountability with our mistakes, right? We'll get stuck in this cycle of, basically not taking responsibility for our mistakes or putting them off on other people, blaming other people, a whole host of things that we explored in that Intuition Lab that can result from that. And another result is that we might stop working on our intuition. We might say, hey, this is too dangerous. This is not territory I want to go into. That was a bad experience. And we might give up on our intuition, which would be a mistake. It would be cutting us off from an important resource, an important part of who we are. So this practice that I'm going to share, which is called emotional freedom technique or tapping, which is practiced fairly widely at this point and is a really powerful, effective process for working through these automatic emotional responses that come up when we're triggered about something. It's a really beautiful practice, simple practice for kind of moving those feelings out of our body so that we can then show up the way that we want to. And I'm going to talk a little bit about tapping, and then we're going to do it. We're going to walk through the practice in a pretty thorough way. So if you want to just jump right to that practice and not hear the description and all this information that I'm going to share, you're welcome to jump to that point. I'll put that timestamp down in the comments below or in the description below. But I want to give a little bit of context for this practice if you're not familiar with it. It is a practice that is doing something that I love, which is it's bringing together kind of very ancient knowledge that we as humans have had about our bodies, about the way that our bodies work and the connection between our physical bodies and our emotions and our spirits and our mind, the integration of all the parts of ourselves. We've, over the millennia of our existence as a species, we've in all cultures developed some pretty refined understandings of those things in the absence of, modern scientific equipment that can measure things like energy and things like what's going on in the brain. And more as we develop the capacity to measure those things scientifically, we're finding that there's quite a bit of these ancient practices that are extremely accurate to what's really happening inside of ourselves. And so there's so much value in remembering and reclaiming those practices, both from a cultural standpoint, from the importance of bringing forward what has been created and in some cases lost from the past, and in terms of the effectiveness of those things. And then we also have the opportunity now to bring those ancient ways of knowing and being and practicing together with modern current understandings of what's happening inside of our brain, for example, in this case, and just new ideas about that. So emotional freedom technique is a coming together of those things. Specifically, it's a coming together of an understanding of the meridian system. So the meridian system is the map, the energetic pathway inside of our body, similar to the vascular system, the system of veins that connects our heart with all, every other part of our body, delivering resources of blood and oxygen and everything else the blood carries to all of the parts of our body. Similarly, the meridian system is a map, a pathway of energy paths and streams and flows that connects all parts of our body with the three brains, like the three neurological centers of our body, which of course are our head, which we've always known about, but also the heart and the gut. We now know that there are neurological cells and neurological activity in the heart and in the gut as strongly as there are in the brain. And the energetic pathways that flow between and from those three brains, which we explored in our very first intuition lab, keep us vital. It keeps our body and our system in a state of vitality, and it's moving resources around the body just as the vascular system does. And those meridians travel from the center, the very, deepest parts of our body, of our internal organs and tissues, out to the surface. And so we can access the internal spaces of our bodies by and influence the movement of energy in those places by stimulating the surface points, the places where those meridians terminate at the surface. And this is the foundation of practices in Asia that have existed for a very long time that create practices like acupuncture, like acupressure, and things of that nature. And so it's drawing on that tradition. And then it's bringing that tradition together with kind of psychological, more modern psychological understandings of the power and the importance of speaking our story, of telling our truth, of saying out loud the secret shameful things that we might wish to not speak out loud or even face at all. That there's great healing and there's great release and catharsis available to us when we have a space where we can speak honestly about our experiences and our feelings. And then it's bringing that together with modern understanding of what is happening inside of our brain when we are traumatized or when we experience something incredibly fearful, that the amygdala in our brain that governs our fight or flight response, the ancient part of our brain that is wired to, seek danger and respond to it, gets activated in those moments of trauma and get kind of permanently turned on to a certain degree and put us in a perpetual state of reliving that story, reliving that trauma, and responding to that fearful experience, even when that fearful experience is long gone. And this process of trauma acting as a consistent stimulant of the fight or flight response and a consistent stimulant of behaviors designed to, send us in the opposite direction of danger, has been identified as the source of an awful lot of suffering, an awful lot of painful experiences of reliving and re-sinking into patterns of behavior that don't serve us, that aren't good for us. And so we talked a bit about that in this intuition lab, where we talked about, our responses when we are wrong, when we have made a mistake and there's been harm that's flowed from that. And some of the things that were identified by folks in that lab that happens in those instances include, feelings of great shame, feeling that we are in big trouble, and that the consequence of trouble, being in trouble, is something like exile or rejection or losing family or being alone, things that are terrible for a pack animal like humans to experience. And the desire to hide those shameful feelings with defensive mechanisms like blame or like anger or like denial of what happened and the harm that we caused. All of which are only going to make a harmful situation worse. They are never going to bring us to a place of reconciliation, a place of repair, a place of integrity, and a place of truly moving forward from our mistake in a way that enables us to grow and become better and become stronger, and perhaps even allow that relationship with that other person who was harmed to become stronger, or at least not worse. So that was a kind of a whirlwind through some of the concepts that come together in the practice of tapping. It's a really interesting history of how the practice was actually developed that I won't go into right now. We're already 14 minutes into this video, but it's super interesting, and it's available in various places. The book, The Tapping Solution by Nick Ortner, is a really good, well-developed resource for learning this system and its history really thoroughly. So I would recommend that for anyone who wants a deeper dive. And there's a number of videos available for that. But let's just, for our purposes today, go right to what is the technique itself. And then we're going to do it, as I said, I promise. So the technique is combining tapping, which is why the nickname for the system is tapping, on the body at a sequence of meridian points. So there's hundreds of meridian points all over our body. And through the development of this practice, a particular concise sequence of those tapping points was put together that are effective for this purpose. And so we'll learn those today. And so you're tapping on those places. So in other words, stimulating those meridian points, which in practices that utilize the meridians, it's understood that stimulating those points through, again, acupressure, acupuncture, things of that nature, can serve to release blockages in that energy pathway, similar to releasing a blockage in a vein in a vascular system. And that by releasing and encouraging free flow of energy in the body, we can actually shift quite a bit about our physical, mental, and emotional state. That there's quite a bit of pain that we hold on to, physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, that gets bound up in these energy pathways. And that releasing that bind in the energy pathway can effectively impact that pain, that emotional suffering, that mental suffering. So we're doing that, and we're pairing that with a specific structure of speech. So again, using the power of speaking what is true for us, speaking our story in a way that kind of liberates us from holding on to the impact of that. So what that looks like is we create a setup phrase that acknowledges what we're feeling and experiencing. So in this case, it might look like, even though I am feeling ashamed of this mistake, even though I'm feeling like I am in trouble and I will be abandoned because of this mistake, even though I'm really, angry and blaming others about this mistake, even though I'm unable to take responsibility for this, just speaking whatever feels like it's at the top of our heart for this situation, naming it as true. The second part of the statement is, even though this is true, I deeply love and accept myself, or I deeply love, accept, and forgive myself, or some other self-accepting, self-compassionate statement. This is a self-compassion practice, which is, again, what we talked about quite a bit in the Intuition Lab, is that self-compassion is key to undoing the inability to take responsibility and accountability for our mistakes so that we can move past them. So even though I'm having this feeling, this experience that's bad, I deeply love and accept myself. We say that 3 times while stimulating the first of these meridian points, which is on the side of the hand right here. And you can do that by just tapping with the other hand, or sometimes I like to just tap both of them together. It gets both of them. We say that 3 times at that point. And then we move through the rest of the points that I will show you. There's several on the face, the collarbones, under the arms, the side of the rib cage, the wrist, and the top of the head. And as we tap on each point, we just say a little reminder phrase that names the key feelings that we're working with and names some truths about them, and kind of moves us through them, and eventually moves us to a place of willingness to let them go. And this is a practice that can happen very quickly. It's a fast process, and one that I have found to be tremendously effective in releasing whatever that sensation is in the body, and then perhaps releasing the thing that's underneath that. So if we're feeling a lot of anger, about this mistake, what's underneath that might be shame or fear. If the fear of rejection might be underneath feeling angry at somebody else. It's accessible, it's quick, it's portable, you can do it anywhere. It might feel a little weird at first. It's a little bit of an odd thing to do, tapping on our body and saying these things that are kind of controlled. But I promise you, they're incredibly effective. And so let's give it a try. So I'm going to run us through this sequence just using the examples that came out in Intuition Lab. And again, applying it to the situation where we've made a mistake and we're feeling, and there's been some harm, and we're feeling resistant to, taking responsibility, taking accountability for that mistake. If that's not an experience you're having right now, but there's something else that you're experiencing that you'd like to move out of your body, then simply modify the words to be speaking what's true for you. So if you're feeling incredibly lonely, or you're feeling afraid about something, or you're feeling really stressed out about something, anything at all, feel free to substitute those feelings for what I'll be running you through. And if you have any questions about this or would like any guidance on how to apply this to your situation, please do reach out to me. All right, so now here we are at the 20-minute-and-a-half mark, and we're going to get into the practice. So again, if you skipped to the practice part, here we are. All right, so the first step is to just really pause in whatever it is that's going on in our life and just tune in to the experience that we're having. So in this case, if I was in this experience we're talking about, I would just take a moment to think about the mistake that was made and the harm that was caused, and just notice the feelings that are coming up. Notice how they're feeling in my body. Maybe I can actually identify a physical sensation associated, like a constriction in my chest, or a welling up in my throat, or a churning in my gut. So maybe I'll notice something like that. And once I'm aware of that feeling, then I'll give it a ranking. I'll rank it on a 1 to 10 scale. So we know where we're starting, right? Is this a 7? Am I feeling this shameful feeling at a 7, or is it a 5? Wherever it is, we note that. Maybe we write it down. And then we'll get started. So beginning at the side of the hands point, we're going to say our setup statement 3 times. Even though I am feeling ashamed at this mistake, I love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling shame about making this mistake, I deeply love, accept myself. Even though I'm feeling ashamed about this mistake and the harm that it caused, I deeply love, accept, and forgive myself. Taking a deep breath, and then we'll begin at the point right at the inner eyebrow. So we're going to work around the bone of the eye, and we're going to begin right here where the eyebrow ends. Tapping on the bone, we'll say, "This shame." We're going to move to the outer eyebrow, again on the bone that surrounds the eye. Feeling so ashamed. And working away around the eye, we're going to go to the bottom of that bone. Oh, all of this shame trapped in my body. Then we're going to move under the nose, in between the nose and the upper lip. These shameful feelings. And then the little crease between the lower lip and the chin, right again on the bone. This shame that feels stuck in my body. Then we're going to go to the collarbones. So there's the bones themselves, and if you follow the bones out to the tip of them, there's that part that kind of protrudes out right about here. We're going to go just below and to the outside of that point. So on the muscle, just below the outer edges of the collarbones. And you can do it just one side or the other, but it always feels good to me to do both of these. And then you can get the bones themselves too. That actually feels good too. So here we'll say, all this shame that is stuck in my body. Then we'll go to the sternum. I wish that it would just go away, this shame. Now we're going to go about 3 inches under the arm. This is the side of the rib cage. This shame in my body, these feelings of shame. Now we're going to go to the inner wrist. This shame that I've held on to for so long. And the top of the head. This shame. I'll take a breath there. And then you just kind of take a moment to notice the feeling. Perhaps give it another rating on that scale. Maybe it was a 7 and now it's a 5. Maybe it was a 5 and it's a 4 now. Okay. And then we'll run that again. And you might also notice, is there anything underneath that, right? So underneath that shame. So perhaps underneath that shame, you notice a feeling of fear of being abandoned because you made a mistake. So let's work with that. Even though I'm afraid I'll be abandoned, I deeply love and accept myself. Even though I'm afraid I will be abandoned, I deeply love and accept myself. Even though I feel afraid that I will be abandoned, I deeply love and accept myself. And if you haven't been already, do this along with me and speak these things out loud, right? As if they are yours. And so just follow along and repeat after me and modifying the words if there's something more accurate for you. Afraid of abandonment. This old fear of being abandoned. This fear stuck in my body. Going to under the nose. I wonder what it's all about. Under the bottom lip, the crease in the chin. I wonder if I can let it go. The collarbones. All this fear of being abandoned. The sternum. All this fear and stress. It's in the way. It's in the way of taking responsibility. Side of the ribs. And I want to take responsibility. So I wonder if I can let it go. Inside of the wrist. What if I could let it go? Top of the head. What might happen? Inner eyebrow. I can feel the other side of this fear. Side of the eyebrow. And I wonder what it would be like to be on the other side of this fear. Below the eye. I wonder if I could let this fear go. I want to let this fear go. And I choose to let this fear go now. Collarbones. This fear that's been stuck in my body for so long. This fear of being abandoned. This fear is not who I am. Inner wrist. And so I choose to let it go. Right now. Top of the head. I choose to step on the other side of this fear and be accountable because that's who I am. And taking another big breath here. And just noticing what's there for you. You might notice a shift in the feeling of fear. That fear of abandonment, that fear of taking responsibility. You might notice that with that fear out of the way, there's something else that comes up underneath that wants some attention. And then you can run this sequence again with that. You might notice that you feel yourself in a really settled place and that you're done for this moment. You might find that you feel capable of taking responsibility for that mistake and moving through it. You might feel more energy and willingness around that. You might also not feel any shift at all, and then I would encourage you to run that sequence again. But I can't recall a time that I applied this practice to something that I was feeling, that I wanted to not be feeling anymore, and didn't feel some shift. There's always been some shift, some release, some relaxation. And this can be used as like a triage, like a in the moment application for something that feels really acute. And ideally, especially if we're working with these old things, which so many of the things that we experience day to day, have been with us for a while. Fear of abandonment, that's likely to be a very old fear that we've carried a long time. It's very beneficial to continue working with that same issue for a period of time, daily preferably, to keep a journal, to keep a log of what you experience, what comes up, the specific emotions or thoughts or feelings or physical sensations that you're aware of that you end up tapping with. And over time, this practice can create some truly amazing changes and transformations in how we feel and what we believe, and how resilient and willing and capable we are to do hard things that are important and necessary. I just can't recommend it enough, even though it feels like a silly thing to do when we first start, this tapping on our body and saying these affirmations. But I really encourage you to give it a try and see what happens. I realized that there's one little thing I neglected to say about the setup phrase that I feel like is important. So I'm just going to circle back to that and then end on that note. I talked about the importance of speaking what's true, right? That even though I'm feeling ashamed, even though I'm feeling afraid, the importance of just naming that, telling the story of what is actually true for us, not trying to cover it over with positive affirmations before we've actually dealt with it, but just really naming what is true for us. The other half of that phrase is just as important. Even though this is absolutely true, I am ashamed, I'm afraid, I messed up really badly. Even though I still love and accept myself, I forgive myself, I appreciate myself. And even if we can't truly touch that feeling of self-love in that moment, it's important that we speak it out loud, because oftentimes what is really at the bottom of all of this, at the core of all of this, is the belief that, because of whatever mistake we've made or because of whatever crappy feeling we're having, there's some part of us, or there's some way in which we're fundamentally unlovable. We're fundamentally not enough, not worthy, not good enough. And it's that belief that so often is the thing that really is holding us back. And so it's incredibly important that while we're stimulating these meridian points, again, opening up flow, opening up a sense of ease and movement and openness in our body, that we're also taking that opportunity to speak what's true and affirm that we are good enough, we love ourselves anyway. Because if we can't love ourselves in all of our faults and flaws and mistakes, then how the hell are we going to expect anybody else to love us inside of it, right? So, I just wanted to end on that, on the importance of that, and on the value of this practice, not only for the topic at hand of holding self-compassion and accountability when we've made a mistake and we're wrong, we've caused harm, but in any other place where we're feeling stuck, any other place where we're feeling that we can't move past it, but that there's something beautiful on the other side that's waiting for us. So I hope this was valuable. I offer this to you as a provision for your journey. It is my hope always that as you navigate your life, as you navigate the challenges and the joys of what this world is bringing to you, that you be deeply provisioned for that journey. And I'm here to help you and to share, what I've learned and what I continue to use all the time in my own journey so that I can remain provisioned as well. So let me know how this worked for you. If you want more of this kind of practice, please let me know and I will be happy to share more. And until then, may you be provisioned, and I love you. Goodbye.